For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LOGRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex 7.
In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted the TheFireStore as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit TheFireStore.com online or in-store today.
Hey, welcome to Fireground Strategies and Other Stuff from the Street on Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio. My partner, Deputy Chief Anthony Avillo, and myself, Battalion Chief Jim Duffy. We're here to do our monthly show. Pretty exciting. I cannot believe it's already November. I feel like, what happened to this year? Although November's been a pretty rough month for the fire service, and it's going to bring us to the subject of our show, but we'll get to that in a minute. First of all, I'd like to say a few words about firefighter Garcia from Houston, Texas, who was lost in the line of duty yesterday. Very, very sad. There was a wall collapse, very limited details. But if you pray, and even if you don't pray, think about firefighter Garcia and the Houston Fire Department and his family. And to all you brothers and sisters out there, please stay safe. Please pay attention and keep your head on the swivel, because bad things can happen. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things and how we can prevent them. So again, say a prayer for firefighter Garcia. So today, we're going to talk very seriously about hidden dangers on buildings, especially if you're on the rooftop. Skylights in newer ordinary construction, the very thin plexiglass to let light in, shaftways in the older taxpayers and commercial buildings in your downtown area, high-rise areas that have the shafts, that the only way air got into these buildings before air conditioning. So if you were in the middle of the building, you didn't have windows on that side, the shaft waves in. Chief Avillo is going to talk about most of this because the fire district he worked in was very, very densely populated and filled with these type of buildings. So he's going to speak about most of it. I'm going to talk a little bit. We had a firefighter in Wallingford many years ago walk off a roof of a building. It's not a shaftway, but you got to know where you are, where the edges are. Pay attention in limited visibility in a smoky area, either the roof or in a hallway. It's important. But also, a lot of things happen when we become complacent. Fire's out, we're moving towards overhaul. Chief Avillo, welcome aboard.
What's happening, Duff? How's everybody doing out there? It's great to see you again, my friend, and great to be on, Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, man. Is it still Blog Talk Radio? Or is it just Fire Engineering Radio?
Fire Engineering Radio. It's an old habit. We've been doing this over 12 years.
A long time.
Pretty crazy.
A very long time. But it's cool, though. Listen, do we both look the same? We must.
I do. My mustache is still brown. My hair is still brown. It's just the camera on my laptop kind of makes me look older.
Yeah. Dude, before we get into this, the fifth inning.
I'm muting you. I'm muting
you. We would have been in a game 6 if that. Oh my God! I never seen anything like it.
Yeah, and removing Cole in the first game, I think, was a bad call too. But anyway, I'm not a manager. Let them,
Yeah, but we have a radio show. We could talk like whatever we want to say, right?
Yep.
But yeah, that fifth inning, we would have been watching Game 6 if it wasn't for that fifth inning.
Yeah, it was painful. It was really painful.
I'm still not over it.
So-
Thank God it's Ranger season.
I have to say, congratulations to the Los Angeles
LA
Dodgers.
Dodgers.
They
Yeah.
were a good baseball team, an incredible baseball team.
Yeah.
I think we could have beat them, though. We just made a couple of bad decisions and bad errors. So, what did they used to say? The Mets used to say, "Wait till next year." Or no, that was Boston. Wait till next year.
Wait till
So
next
anyways-
year. And Ohtani's a lot tougher than I thought he was.
Yeah, absolutely. He was
You know?
incredible.
You could see he was in a lot of pain, and he pushed through it, man.
Yeah.
He didn't hit a lot. He wasn't, but just the presence.
Yep.
You know?
Definitely some motivation from that man. But one more
Anyway,
thing.
I seen the hat. I had to say something.
You were just talking about fire engineering talk radio, and something we have so many shows on the air now. There's like 30 a month or 25 a month, all different subjects. The professional volunteer, people who are talking about strategy and tactics, people who are talking about leadership, people talking about networking, EMS. There's so many shows on fire and you can always find what you want. If you Google fire engineering talk radio, you can find the list. And you can, you'll see Duffy and Avillo on Fireground strategies, and you can click one. And if you're looking for a specific subject, I know they're going to make that more visible so that if they're looking for show on shafts like we're doing today, and the likes, that you could find that, because they're going to put a description on it, but we have to send the description ahead of time.
Right.
So
Right.
lot.
Well, that's the one that's one of the things that Mark said, well, send a description of the class you're going to do. And I put in it, we never know what we're going to do. How do we send a description?
Well,
this month, fortunately, we do have a subject, but we don't always have one.
Yes. And we end up talking about the Yankees already.
Exactly.
So anyway, I know you have, you're going to be teaching this weekend in my old stomping grounds on Long Island, and hopefully I'll be able to stop and see you, because I will be down there. But anyway,
you can use your line.
You know what? Now I'm definitely stopping. I'm bringing more.
I know. Yeah, you're definitely
I'm
coming.
going to come in my tuxedo.
There you go. Perfect. That's perfect. So
start us off here.
All right. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we've had a couple of incidents over the past week with firefighters falling into shafts. As Duff had said, he had a guy fall off a roof. My first deputy chief fell into a shaft off a 5-story building, stepped over the parapet wall, I guess, and fell into the shaft. He hit a clothesline on the way down and landed in the garbage. So, aim for the garbage. But, he fell 5 floors, broke his back. Very, very tough guy. Know of 2 other guys in Union City that fell into shafts. Both of them were very narrow shafts. One guy rode the shaft down like with his arms on the sides and rode the shaft down. And the other guy, I believe he only fell it might have only been 2 floors, but something stopped him. Nobody was killed, and thank God. I know I was just talking to Jerry Tracy right before we got on this podcast, and he was talking about a firefighter that fell into a shaft in New York City and passed away years and years ago. There was another guy, and I remember when I read Report from Engine Company 82, he the first chapter, he's talking about Signal 5555, and he was talking about a guy named Edward Toot. And he didn't know the guy, but it was I guess as he was writing the book, that line of duty death occurred, and Edward Toot fell through a weakened roof into a shaft, and he I think he fell 7 floors and was killed. And I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, Tuite, but you're talking that had to be over 50 years ago. Unfortunately, the buildings that were with us 50 years ago are still with us today. And I think it's important for people to understand the dangers that they face when they deal with these buildings, and not only on the roof, which is probably the most dangerous, but inside the building. If you have, and this is what Jerry Tracy was telling me about. you got a fire in a shaft, you got to be very careful about what doors you open, what windows are opened. You open up the bulkhead without closing the doors, you could pull the fire right across the apartment and right into the shaft. And, you can kill everybody coming down the stairs. You can cut off all your egress points. The smaller buildings, of course, are going to be more susceptible to that than the bigger buildings. But, I remember we had a fire in an apartment building, and I was on the floor below the fire. I was a battalion chief, and they were upstairs, and they were hitting it quickly from the outside in the apartment that the fire had spread into. And I wanted to just get a size up on the floor above, so I forced the door on the lower floor. And as soon as I forced the door and opened the door, it was an inward opening door. The fire came around the corner and just came right at the door. And I'm thinking, wow, this fire isn't on the floor above us. It's on this floor too. It turned out it was in the shaft, and we had come in on mutual aid. This was in North Bergen before the regionalization. And the fire just whipped around the corner. It was almost like it was like flapping its wings. It was so crazy. No smoke. It was just this big, huge fucking tongue of fire. And I did as much as I could, I had to get the door closed. It was an inward opening door. So I'm trying to pull the door closed. And, luckily for us, we did have a line in the area, and I did get the door closed. But I said, look, there's a lot of fire behind this door, so, let command know and that. But I believe what happened was when I opened that door, I pulled the fire out of the shaft, and it was an apartment building. So, it could happen anywhere. I think it's important because there will be departments, and I've heard this a million times when I was the director of the academy. Why do we need to learn about these things? We don't have this in our jurisdiction. And then, you find out that, yes, they do. Anybody's got that Main Street buildings, ordinary construction, wood frame. They're 100 years old, 80 years old. You're going to have shafts that they might be covered up. Or you could be out on mutual aid. And you go out on mutual aid and you got fire running a cock loft, and, they send you up to the roof to assist in a roof operation. Some of these kids, they ain't never been on a roof. Yep. They've never cut a roof, and now they're up on a roof where there's shafts in between. It's a dangerous, dangerous situation because not every shaft is going to be protected. Most of ours, the only nice surprises are on your birthday, but
they're not always nice.
Yeah, you're right. Shafts that are protected in my area are a rarity. And we have open shafts, closed shafts, shafts that are covered over illegally, most of them.
Yeah, I want you to stop there with the covered over. When they built these, they opened so they could get ventilation from the apartments. They would open windows, and they had glass skylights on top of them that opened, with chains and or ropes or things. Now what they've done as they've renovated the buildings, that glass is gone, and they just put tar paper sometimes over them. And it's you walk on that, there's nothing holding up except a couple furring strips and a tar paper and shingles they put on top of it. And you end up down 4 flights or 2 flights or even 1 flight if it's a commercial
it doesn't
strip.
matter. Yeah. The downward, but the other thing with the shafts is they were there because the buildings were built before air conditioning. So above the doorways, you would have a transom, which is outlawed now. A lot of them you can still see, and they're covered over. But the transom would be sort of like an awning window, and you would open the transom and then open your window in the apartment, and the air would flow from the hallway to the shaft and back. And that's why shafts were there. A lot of times you're going to see these from recon from the rear, and you might see them right from the front or recon from the roof. But, when you're doing an investigation or a building familiarization and you're a sharp officer, you come across a building that's attached and you walk into that building and you see windows on the sidewalls. That tells you got a shaft. If it's an attached building, there shouldn't be any windows on the sidewalls. So in an old law building, a real old building, and this is not an absolute, the shaft windows would generally be in the apartments. But in the newer law buildings, they not only be in apartments, they'd also be in the hallway, But that's a very good rule of thumb to take a look at. Side windows in an attached building, you have to be thinking there's shafts there. There is just no other reason to have sidewall windows on an attached building. They shouldn't be there. It should just be a wall, you know? The other thing, look at, and we're going to look at some pictures here. The other thing is you see a half shaft at the end of a building. Well, that generally means there's a half shaft on the other side. And if there's a building attached, there's a half shaft there too, which makes a full shaft. You know, so that size up point from the exterior, maybe from the corner or from a lot and then the building on the corner, because, you know, we graciously burned down a building on that corner, you know, you might see a half shaft. Anytime you see a half shaft on one side, you got to be thinking there's one on the other side, you know, and that may not always be the case, but, you know, more times than not, it probably will be, you know.
Truth.
So what's like up in Wallingford? Do you have an area where there are shafts?
Yeah, the attached buildings. You know, the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard for me to keep calling them other than taxpayers, but what they are, they're
right.
Some of them are 2 stories, some of them are 6 stories. So you have the stores on the first floor and maybe 5 floors
Mm-hmm.
of apartments above it. And a lot of those will have those shafts, mostly for light and ventilation because they were built at the turn of the century,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
Early 1900s, a few before the 1900s. And then I'm going to say some of the newer buildings, like the big warehouses, they have these plexiglass skylights in them. They're literally made out of
Mm-hmm.
plexiglass. The weight of a firefighter on a smoky night, they're going down. Now, it's a 1-floor building, but the building's 2 stories high. Do you know what I mean?
It's 30 feet deep.
Right, it's 30
Yeah.
feet tall. And it's really important as they build these things to know what's up there, because you're going to be up there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the only thing you're going to have is your hand light, or it's smoke, and you're up there to cut a roof or just to do recon to look around the back side,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. You could end up walking on that plexiglass, and literally their plexiglass, they will not hold the weight of a firefighter with turnout gear on them.
There was one in Newark, and it was an exposure building, and it wasn't plexiglass. It was corrugated fiberglass meltout panel. And a battalion chief stepped right through one and went down about 30 feet and ended his career. And it was an exposure building, you know. Listen, where are we taught to sound the roof as we walk with the weight on the back foot? We're taught in Firefighter 1, you know, but we make Firefighter 1 type mistakes. Listen, chiefs walk on water, but we don't walk on air, you know. And I'll be quite honest with you, 99% of the people that I know, including myself and probably my buddy Duffy here, would have also fallen through that particular night, only because exposure building, nighttime, you know, we let our guard down, you know, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't.
You know, it's so true. We were complacent. We've walked on roofs. You know, it's not a big fire. You're doing recon. There's a smell of smoke. You know, you're going up there to check the air conditioner to see if it's something burning in the air conditioning unit on the roof. And you're just walking. We do that. The building's, you know, 100 by 200. So you're just going to, you know, you get casual and complacent and you walk across the roof and it's dark and you step on that, you know, and some of these things are 8 feet by 8 feet or 4 feet by 4 feet. And it's very easy to do. We have to train on that because you know what? There's guys working, only been on a job 3 years, and they've been in an engine company. They never been on a roof before, you know, and they may be assigned to the truck that night or been sent up the interior staircase to go check out the air conditioner. They're walking across the roof to get to the air handling units. So there are a lot of dangers, and they're hidden because of lighting or smoke. But also our ability limits what we can see. We're not looking for a plastic cover on a hole. Like you said, the melt out, I never heard of that, you know, where I've worked.
Yeah.
And you know what? It makes sense. They're protecting their building. It's like a fire door in a big warehouse. The fusible link and doors close.
Yeah. Well, this meltout panel, they were all symmetrically placed. So like you see one, they were like maybe like a dozen of them or something from what I remember. But they were also, a guy in Connecticut fell through a skylight because it was a snow-covered parking garage. and he went through a skylight. He fell down like 2 flights of stairs, really, really got hurt. And another guy who didn't have a light on the roof fell through a skylight in Colorado and was killed. You have to protect yourself on a roof, and that's the problem. You get people that either haven't been up there and they're not sure what to look for, or people who have been there a lot and have gotten complacent.
There's also another link. In departments don't do a lot of work like that. So there are places that they have 5 years on the job, and not knocking that. There's 5 years on a job. He could have gotten enough experience, taken the tests, and got promoted to lieutenant or captain, wherever that might be. But they're not teaching that because the lieutenant has been on an engine company his whole career and has never experienced that, doesn't remember it. And now he's charged with teaching the newer members and his company. That's when you need the senior men who've experienced this to help the officer, because the officer doesn't know everything. Nobody knows everything. But there's some senior guy that's been on a truck for 15 or 20 years. Hey, boss, you know what? This building over here, we had a fire there a few years ago, and this is what they got. Mind if we, today go up there and take a look at it? Get out of the firehouse and see what's in your district. And the older guys, it does two things. It remotivates the older guys that are starting to say, I got a few more years left to go. But he can share that knowledge. Don't let that knowledge walk out the door when he retires.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's there's so many little details and little tricks of the trade, that older guys can pass on. And when we look at these pictures, we're going to talk about these things, and
why don't we bring up the pictures and the things we just discussed? I know you have pictures of, and we'll set it up. And
I think so. Yeah.
You ready to go?
Yeah. So this particular building here, this is 5-story. Ordinary construction, but as you can see on the roof, we're looking at the back of the building. Up towards the front, you could see open shafts. Now, this is one long building. They're like, it's like an E with an extra, an extra top. It's like a 4-point E, right? But you have open shafts at the front and open shafts at the back. The only way you can walk across this building is in the center. Right. So the lesson is, the parapet wall, and we'll see more of these too. You got a parapet wall. This is right outside the Lincoln Tunnel in Weehawken. You got a parapet wall. You might be able to step over a parapet wall to the next roof, but in this particular building, you can't. It's a 6-story drop to the ground, and again, it could be nighttime, and there's some roof features up there. All the way to the right is the elevator bulkhead. There are 4 stairwell bulkheads in this building. It's got very, very large open interior stairs. There's also a dumbwaiter shaft here and some other good roof features that you want, look at roof features. The biggest thing is you have that big sign up there, which is probably worth more than the whole building because everybody coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel sees it. But we're going to look at some other shaft pictures as we go through here. Did the picture change stuff?
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. So I used some circles and squares here. You can see all the way to the right, you have 2 complementary sort of, I call those like half diamond shafts in a way. But you can see where the parapet wall ended. And then you can see the parapet wall as you come across towards the left. There are some skylights there. And then coming across between the 3-story and the 4-story multiple dwelling is a very large shaft there. And on the square is another half shaft on the other side. So, these buildings all have shafts in them. They're all attached. All right. That's New York City in the background. Now, this is looking down from a building where we had a fire in. And it was a 4-story next to a 3-story. And you're looking down from the roof of the 4-story. But on the right is a picture of the apartment. So this was a kind of a narrow ordinary constructed shaft, but you could see how much damage was in the apartment. There's really nothing left on the walls. The problem you're into, the apartment behind it is exposed, and all floors are exposed in there. The narrower the shaft, the more heat you might have in the shaft, and if it's wood frame, it's going to be even worse. But in this case, I remember this fire we had. I remember seeing the fire venting out of the roof when we got there, which, kind of sometimes tells us it's a shaft fire. But the other thing was nothing ignited in that shaft except the flashing up around the roof of the 4-story building. Everything else went straight up. There was a little bit of extension into the back apartment, which you can see in this picture, but you could just walk off this roof. There's no protection from the around the shaft. So these are two different buildings here. All right, one's a rear shaft, one's a front shaft. The front shaft you're going to see readily. The rear shaft you will not, unless you're either looking at from the rear or you're up on the roof. Now, if you look in the shaft, you can see the parapet walls go at sort of catty quarter angles, I guess 45-degree angles. That's a better one. You see those 45-degree angles, chances are right in the center of those 45-degree angles, there's a firewall that goes straight back to the other side of the building. All right. So the firewall goes straight back. You might be able to walk straight over. Maybe. You always want to check the other side. But when you have that sort of 45-degree angle break off at the end of the firewall, chances are you have a big shaft there. And, and you might say, well, I could see that. But, nighttime, heavy smoke conditions, these are things that, may cause guys to and girls to get themselves in trouble. Here's one in the center of the building. All right. You can see the firewall at the front and at the back. You can see the two bulkheads there. But here's one at the center of the building. You also have a gooseneck ladder in there, which means you could have a life hazard, right? The thing about this is, the firewall is really nice. It negates, hopefully like any cockloft extension, but you have this big open shaft here, which has windows all over the place on it, and the possibility of somebody being on that fire escape that now, we may have to conduct a rescue. All right. But the enclosed shaft here is only visible from the roof, or if you're sharp, from the interior. If you notice it's a attached building, you see windows in the interior here, they're probably in the hallway. It's going to tell you got shafts in this building. All right. Chime in on anything you want here, Duff.
Yeah. The other thing about this, and again, they don't have them where I worked, but where I was a volunteer, these existed. A lot of the apartments share that. Maybe not this one, but share that shaftway for ventilation when the building was built. So there are windows that open into multiple apartments and or the hallways, so there's a lot of exposure problems there, especially if, auto exposure, although we always say it's exterior, but it is exterior. So if you've got a fire on the first floor and it's venting out and you have a window open on the third floor, you may have extension.
Of course, yeah, and curtains flapping out of them, things like that, and again, if it's a wood frame building, probably only going to be 3 floors, but you're going to have these combustible exterior walls, So let's look at another one. So this is something like I would always do the last few years of my career. If I got a reported fire or wherever, I would always bring up the address on my phone, because you might have it in the rig, but once you get out of the rig, you don't see this. So I'd bring it up on my phone or once we had a tough book, which we didn't have anymore, and I would see this, right? So I would be able to, let my ladder companies know, listen, you got shafts up there. If you look at this, the building closest to the bottom, you could see the open shaft on the Charlie side. All right. And again, windows on the side walls. But what's interesting here is right on the other side of that open shaft, there's a bulkhead. A firefighter coming out of bulkhead in the smoke and making a left because the building next door is the one on fire. He's going to take a 5-story drop into that shaft. The building next to that, the 2 buildings next to that, they share a shaft just like the other ones did. There's probably a firewall there. It's kind of hard to tell, but there may not be. Brunacini said the only perfect firewalls are in heaven. But again, these are attached buildings. And the only place you're going to see the shaft is from the roof, from the inside if you're sharp, or from somebody going to the rear. In this case, just in between the corner building and the which would, I guess, be the delta exposure. Now, this is one, we talked a little bit about this. That's a shaft in the rear. It's an open shaft. You have a parapet, a firewall that we're looking at that's heading back towards that shaft. So, you can step over on this front side here. And we're looking from the Alpha side to the Charlie side, I believe. I'm pretty sure, only because there's gooseneck ladders over here on the 2 sides in the back. And again, you got a bulkhead there. You got some vent pipes. You got the big chimney there. That's one thing I was just talking to Jerry Tracy about. And he said, you know what? You get a guy give a Mayday in a commercial building or even in a regular building. He's down in the basement. You ask him where he is. If he tells you he can see, maybe see a boiler or in a boiler room, well, just find a chimney. You might have a good chance at finding the guy. Or bus bars or electrical, look for the service connections. That's where that guy's got to be. I always have these great conversations with Jerry Tracy, just a wealth of information, man. But this one right here, if you, like in the first picture we saw, you step across that parapet wall in the back of these buildings, you're going to take a ride down to the street, or to the alley in between. Okay.
Yeah, one thing you could have crossed over that there on your way there. So you came up a ladder on, one side, you crossed over, and then you want to come back towards the rear. You're going to encounter that open.
Yeah, listen, it's a very common mistake. I would think. Well, I don't know, maybe very common, but very, very potentially common occurrence. Right now, this is an interesting one. Okay. This one has a parapet firewall at the front, but at the back, there is no protection.
Wow.
There's nothing at all. So if you come out of the bulkhead on the left, you could see part of it, and you got a heavy smoke condition, you could walk right off into that shaft. That's a 4-story drop. Now, here's a pretty good rule of thumb. These buildings are all built in rows. So if I got a lot of smoke near the fire building, first of all, I'm not going to access the fire building roof when I got attached. I'm going to access, maybe 2 buildings over if I can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see where the shaft is. Oh, the shaft's in the back. Well, let me look at the next building. Ooh, shaft's in the back. I can't see the other building, a lot of smoke, but where am I thinking the shaft is? I'm thinking it's probably in the back. It's not a definite, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. When these buildings were built in rows, the shafts were all basically in the same place, which kind of gives you a little bit of good recon here. All right. But again, in these here, you would have windows in the apartments on the side walls towards the back of the building. I believe these were, because I could see the fire scab, these are probably railroad flats, most likely. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember what building this was.
How deep are they?
I'm going to say about 60 feet. They were probably 20 by 60.
Yep.
The old law apartment buildings, okay, with the combustible cellar and the cellar door, right underneath the stairs, okay. Here's another interesting one. This is a row of 3-story. There were no stores here. This is in Weehawken, but that little thing right there is like a bathroom shaft. On both sides of those apartments, and those are single apartments, there's bathrooms. So you can, and they're usually frosted glass, so you can't see into the next bathroom. But they're the same all the way down the row in the same exact spot. We had a guy step in one of them and break his kneecap. And only skinny guys are going to fall in there, but like, somebody could break their kneecap in one of these things. And the other end of it, if fire gets in there, because it's small, you may see this Roman candle effect coming out of the roof. Smaller the shaft, the more heat's trying to get out, the more of a Roman candle effect you're going to see. You might think the fire's through the roof, but, especially if it's between 2 buildings, think again, it probably not through the roof. It's probably venting into a shaft somewhere. Okay. Now, here's another interesting one. This is in Union City. Now, you could see this very long to the front of we're looking at the corner of the building. There's a very long sort of shaft there that 2 buildings share. But then you look across to the next building and they have the same thing, but it's covered up. And then all the way on the end of the building, you could see almost a half of that shaft that's also covered up. It doesn't mean the shaft, of course, the shaft is still there. 99% of the time, the shaft is still there. Now, these other sort of dark spots in between the open shaft and the covered shaft, I'm not sure what they are. They may also be covered over shafts, or maybe covered over skylights from years ago. But the fact here is you have these 2 big shafts, and these are like horizontal shafts. They're not really common shafts by us, but again, you got one open, you got one covered. You always, and you could tell, look at the roofing, right? the roofing is not matched with the rest of the roof where these shafts are covered up. And listen, there may also be a shaft, on that last building at the top of the picture over to the left, that little tiny thing there. I bet that's a shaft too. That looks like it's open. But, you look at these buildings and you're working on these buildings, you don't have a lot of experience. And that's the only tree left in Union City right behind those buildings. Except they plant a little one over here right in the front. That car probably hit it by now and that's gone. But these shafts could be anywhere, and you have to work on these roofs, with a certain amount of extreme caution. Especially at night, especially in the smoke condition. Right? We good?
Yeah, one thing these are accessible from interior too. So a firefighter in smoky conditions could end up backing into a shiny. It's not common, but it does happen as well.
Yeah.
You could be on the third floor or the second floor and somehow end up in a shaft. It's not just on the roof. Some of the windows you open, or it's already opened. So again, and the bigger the buildings they are, and the older the buildings are, the more common they are.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about Captain Richie Barreras in the very last slide here, I think. Here's another one. Now, this is an interesting one too. This is Bergen Line Avenue in West New York. Look at these buildings here. Now, in between the two places I've circled, you can see two open shafts, right? Two open diamond shafts. But the circles are covered over diamond shafts. You look and they're exactly the same, only the two in the circles are covered and the two in the middle are not. Right? Then you go all the way down all the way to the top of the picture. You can see the half shaft, and then you can see a much larger building with its own sort of bigger shaft. But this is one of those things, and we'll talk about that. And I think we did a little bit. I got a half shaft on the top building there on the top of the picture. That means I got another half shaft where you see that circle. You see a half shaft, and the other building is a half, which makes a whole shaft. So it's kind of, I can't. There we go. It's kind of like that. And again, this building might have old scuttles, and I can't, you can't tell what's there, but you see some of those discolored things, and they could be old scuttles, they could be old vent holes. I don't know. These are really old buildings. This one is covered, and there actually happens to be barriers up on the top. Not every day's your birthday. Those are the only barriers I have ever seen in North Hudson. This one's in Weehawken. And, you can look at that. I guess they covered it over, just to, I don't know why they would cover it over. I guess, for I don't know, sunlight in the apartment. I don't know. Why would you cover one of these things over like that?
If you're asking me, I can't think of a single reason.
No, I can't either, but this is a wood frame building. Right?
And
so fire coming out of those windows.
What I can see here is three stories.
Yeah, braced frame, I'm sure, or what some people call post and beam. But you know what? It looks like everything on that roof looks like a different color, most likely. And I don't have a picture of the roof itself, but we saw some in the pictures before that. And don't step on that stuff. Anything in between those barriers up there, those sort of little fencing areas, don't step in there. So sometimes they're going to cover them up. This one, you can see there was renovation going on up on this roof. I think this is a fire building that they had, and they covered it up. Think about what that's going to do to the heat and the smoke inside that area. This is a wood frame building. You get a fire that vents into that shaft. What's going to happen in there? You're going to have, extreme heat inside there. It's not going to be able to escape. And you're going to have if the fire's on the first floor, vents in a shaft, these are 3-story buildings. You're going to very rapidly get fire extending into each building on the second and the third floor. And again, I can't see how this is legal. But it's Union City, right? Now, this is an interesting one as well. This was a fire building as well. You can see in the back, you have that corrugated sort of Q decking with sort of that wiring, and that's over a shaft as well. But the one in the foreground, the one you see right in front of you here, that's also a shaft between the two buildings, which goes over more to the left. And again, you can see railings around it, right? But the railings are only on the back side. They're not on the front side. And this was an interesting building because there was a building just like it. And one of the captains shared with me that they had that kind of like chicken wire over the shaft, but there was a laundromat below, and the vents were there. So the vents were shooting out the lint, and it was a nighttime fire, and it looked like there was snow on it. And they were like, "What is this?" Thank God they used a tool to probe ahead of them, and all the lint fell off it, and they were like, "Oh, just a shaft," So yeah, know your buildings. You got a laundromat, and you have you don't know where. It's not venting out of the back. It might be venting into a shaft, which means then if there is something like that over it, you can make a pretty big mistake here.
Yeah, same. It could be a restaurant too.
Yeah.
I don't think they should be legal, but I'm sure there's plenty of places where they have the vent going right into the shaftway.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one, believe it or not, that little spot in the center between those two windows, that's a half diamond shaft, right? A half diamond shaft, and that is a asphalt sided wall. So you got a 4-story wood frame and a 3-story wood frame. And at some point there was a fire between those buildings. I don't know which one, quite honestly, I'm thinking it was probably in a smaller building, and it vented out of the shaft, and you could see all of the scorch on the asphalt siding of the higher exposure, right? That's a tiny little shaft there. So with those shafts, if it's railroad flats, which I'm thinking this is because I'm only seeing one fire escape in the back. So if it's railroad flats, then that may just be like, 2 windows in the apartment in the bedrooms or something. But if it's not railroad flats, those windows may be 2 different apartments, front apartment and back apartment. I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you that that's a tiny shaft, and that's another one. Look at that one. Frank Ritchie fell into something very similar to that. Fell into a shaft up in New Haven.
Yeah, this
is a building here now.
There was actually a firefighter sometime in the 90s. I don't remember. I believe his name was Firefighter Kelly. He fell down a shaft. And one of the problems was at the bottom of the shaft, it was filled with water. And he ended up almost drowning in that. And I think he had some, I'm not even going to talk. I don't know what his injuries ended up being, but it was devastating, career ending. And yeah, it was in New Haven. And I don't know whether it was a 4-story.
What was that movie? Was it Ladder 49 or Backdraft, where the guy falls into the shaft and he's in the water? What movie was that?
I don't know.
Yeah, there was a movie where a guy fell into a shaft. I think it was Ladder 49. It might have been Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure.
But it definitely
this is
happened.
Another. Yeah. This is another small shaft here. And the thing in the middle is some kind of vent there. I'm not sure, maybe from a kitchen or something. But this one, luckily, has asbestos siding, which doesn't really burn. But you can see there's a chimney there to the left. And this is just, and remember we talked about the half shaft? That's a half shaft. This building on the left, the small building, has no shaft. It may be actually a blind. It may be, a blank wall. It may just be a straight up wall. Maybe no windows on the wall on the smaller building. The bigger building may have windows on it, but this also tells me that there's another complementary or identical shaft on the opposite side of this building. If this is the B side, then on the D side, there's going to be another shaft over there. And I don't know. You got to always take that into consideration when you're dealing with exposures or falls and everything else.
Let me ask you a question about the diamond shaftways. What's the diameter? What's the dimensions of those?
It depends. They're really small. We'll see some pictures and we can kind of, I'm thinking probably no more than 6 feet on the back wall and maybe 3 and 3 on the angles.
Yep.
Most of the time, if it's a half shaft, the back wall away from the apartment is unpierced. Most of the time, but we'll take a look. All right. So now this one here, you can see in the background the cover that was on this shaft. All right. They took this shaft off. This was again in Union City. All right. This shaft is only common to, it's only in the building on the left. Now, that building on the right is most likely that's an unpierced wall there. All right. But the things around the inside of that shaft, you can see that sheetrock sort of, you got to open that up. Those are called the returns. If you are opening up that, you want to, and again, same would be with a skylight or a scuttle. You want to open up the returns because then you're only venting the top floor. You want to vent the cock loft, okay? And you can see that the area above the roof is probably only about a foot, but those pieces of sheetrock there are probably about 3 feet. So this is probably like a 2-foot cock loft, or somewhere maybe a 1.5 feet, smaller building, smaller cock loft, okay? But that's probably an unpierced wall on the right. And again, firewall, parapet, firewall. And again, the only good firewalls are in heaven. Look at all the wires coming out of it, by the way. And in the forefront, see all the wires? Duff?
Yes, sir, I do. I thought that was a rhetorical question. I didn't know it was aimed at me.
No.
Yes, I do. I see a lot
lots of wires.
That's cable, telephone. Who knows what else is coming out of there?
God knows what. Sharing of services, right? So this is what the Roman candle condition. If you have a shaft, a narrow shaft with a good fire condition going in there, it's going to heat up very quickly, and you're going to see something like that. This is the fire Vinny Neglia was killed at. They had nothing showing. Somebody said somebody's up on a 3rd floor of the building that you could see that 3-story right there. And they went upstairs and, maybe when they opened the doors and everything, they changed the dynamics of what was happening in the shaft because the shaft had a thermal pane skylight over it. And the fire had started, somebody threw a cigarette in it. It was garbage in the shaft, like there always is a lot of times. And it snuffed itself out. And they got there, they could smell smoke, but nothing showing. And there was a backdraft in the shaft and a backdraft in the cock loft. And Anthony Cospito was able to dive down the stairs. And he actually knocked all the guys coming up with the line down. And Vinny Neglia was in the kitchen. He got caught in between the ceiling hinged down and the window broke. And we'll show you the type of window it was in a picture here. The window broke and he got caught between the two of them and he never got out. There was nothing showing, so they have a mask on, and chances are he inhaled flame because I know they couldn't intubate him when they got him out of the building. So, but what happens is we would be looking for this Roman candle condition. We'd look for this, and we didn't see that night until the backdraft occurred and it melted the skylight that was over the shaft, and then you saw, the true telltale sign of a shaft fire. So, 2006. There's the 2 half shafts on each side.
Yes, sir.
You have a skylight. And a scuttle in the center. All right. Now, this building, it's weird because by us, most of these buildings are all built together. So half shafts make full shafts. We'll see pictures in a minute, but this one kind of stood on its own. I don't know, because the building on the left, that 2.5-story frame, that looks like it's been there a long time. The building on the right looks like it's been there a long time. So again, it just shows you they're looking to get air and a breeze into the inner apartments in this building before electricity and before air conditioning. You probably only had gas at that time for lighting and stuff. So they were just trying to get, air into the rooms in the apartments. And again, we're looking here from the Alpha side. So I am thinking that and we're looking at Charlie's side. I don't even see a fire escape on this building, which is kind of interesting. Do you?
I do not.
Neither do I. That's very interesting because there should be a fire escape.
Could be on the A side, there could be fire escape.
Yeah, but usually it would have. That's what I'd be thinking. I'd be looking for a gooseneck ladder.
Yep.
And the gooseneck ladders are usually on the back. Yeah. So, listen, Hudson County, Union City. Right?
It was a long time ago.
So So here's another shot. This is a row of taxpayers, what some may call them. We call them mixed use occupancies. If you go, we start on the extreme right. You could see there's an HVAC unit on the roof right there, which it probably wasn't designed for. And right next to the HVAC unit, you could see a small shaft. And then it looks like that's a chimney. Small shaft, but there's a parapet wall there, which tells me most likely if the fire was in the building all the way to the right, so it'll be the Bravo exposure, that wall would probably be unpierced. Okay. But if you look at the left side of the Bravo exposure, there's another shaft. Again, with a skylight next to the parapet wall, which is probably again a firewall, but who knows? Buildings are old. And then you move over to which would be B1 and B2, and now you have a full shaft where the parapet walls and the firewall has been negated. Right?
Interesting.
Kind of interesting, right? 4 buildings that look like they were all built at the same time with 4 different sort of orientations with the shafts.
Right? Just to give you a heads up, you're teaching in Massapequa this weekend. This is what you'll see in their downtown Main Street area. You'll see this.
Okay.
Maybe a little newer.
Well, not good.
But
at least,
so you have something to, compare it to the area you're going in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And these buildings have pretty big parapets at the front and on the Delta side, on the street sides, so, be careful getting up on the roof there. There's no bulkheads, so I wouldn't be coming up through the stairwell. Even if I was looking to come up to a scuttle, I don't think that's a good idea. I think here you would probably use an aerial. Now, with the stores, this I think is in Cliffside Park. Stores generally, because the ground floor store has, there's more, the real estate's more valuable. So a lot of times with a store, they'll start the shaft that's a second floor, like you see here. Now, if there's a store right next to it, which sometime maybe it'll be a full shaft with windows on both. Now, this might have an apartment in the front, an apartment in the back. You might find somebody in that shaft, right? And if there was a building next to it, there would probably be a shaft twice that size with windows, on the back side, and there's a window you can't see on the front side. You can also see, and it looks like it looked to me like a cockloft vent, but it's kind of low on the wall, so I'm not really sure what the hell that is. But yeah, a lot of times the stores are not going to have the shafts going all the way to the ground. A lot of times they're just going to they'll stop at the first floor. Here, this is a 2-story building. All right, there's your diamond shafts, half diamonds, right? So you can see the half diamond shaft right in the center of the black roof, okay? Which usually the wall on the straight wall, which is parallel with what the roof line would be, I guess. Not the angles of the triangle. Those have windows on them. The back wall is probably unpierced. Same with the one right next to it. That's not a hard and fast rule. It's kind of what I've come across, but there could be a window on that wall. But here's the thing with this: how fast is the fire going to heat up that area? How fast is it going to jump through that shaft? And this is where you would see a Roman candle condition. But those there, man, you know what? I've seen them covered over. And they have like sort of small parapets around them. Don't step in the middle. Sometimes they're full diamonds, and the 2 angles, right? Now, this is a diamond shaft from the inside, right? This is probably, there's a window on the other side of that doorway right there. So it was just one apartment. I think these were railroad flats, but this is very similar to the shaft that where the backdraft occurred where Vinny Neglia was killed. This particular building, not the same building. I remember coming here, and the reason I took this picture, this is the 3rd floor. The garbage was piled up to the 2nd floor. Like the people on the 1st floor, they closed their curtains because the garbage was right outside their window, right? People just threw it in there, But this is a half diamond shaft that is going to, it's going to heat up very, very quickly. And it's going to spread fire inside these apartments real fast, especially if the windows are open in the apartment. And especially if there's something, a cover on the top of the shaft, if they put, sheetrock up there or whatever, just to keep the rain out or whatever, So look a little more. We got a few more here. All right, there's ordinary construction with a half diamond shaft. All right. I think this is the same building we saw before, but you can see that's an unpierced wall there. But again, you could think about all the heat that might build up in there. that, could, cause the window frames to start to burn, curtains, things like that, break the windows, that sort of thing. The smaller the shaft, the faster it's going to heat up. All right. But the other end of it is you fall in there as a firefighter, man. You know how hard it is to get somebody out of there if you can't get them out through the windows, because there ain't no doors down there at the bottom. Bigger Italian apartment building. You might have doors down on the bottom leading to like laundry room areas, things like that. But a lot of times those doors have been bricked over too over the years. Now, these are interesting because we're looking at the alpha side. We can cross over at the front. We can't cross over at the back, right? You step across that in the back. Will you fall through there with your pack on? Probably not, but you will get stuck. You may break your kneecap, right? You can see where there's skylights and scuttles on the back of these buildings. It's generally over the stairwell, right? Open interior stairs. The building all the way to the right has a window, which if you have fire coming through the roof of that first 2-story building, it's going to expose. Be careful about the exposure to that building. You got to get a line up to that top floor. Here's one with front shafts. Now, somebody had said something, mentioned on Facebook, no, you never have them in the front. And I beg to differ. That first building we saw had them in the front, and this one has them in the front. Here they're in the back, here they're in the front. So now here's what happens. You can walk across in the back, but not at the front. You get a good smoke condition, or guys start to get lazy and they want to, come from an exposure building to fire building roof, and they want to talk to whoever's out there. That's a very easy shaft to fall into. Very, very easy to fall into. But again, if you come up on this building, you come up away from the fire on the upwind side, you could see where all these shafts are. So if I got a shaft between this building, that building, chances are there's shafts all the way down in the same place. So that's always a pretty good rule of thumb that I've found works, but not all the time. Not all the time. Don't, listen, the roof that you don't sound as you're walking with the weight on your back foot is the roof you're going to fall through. Now there's the full shafts in between each building. And if you look at the building in the top left corner, there's another front shaft right there. Okay. But these buildings here up in front of those square shafts are bulkheads. Those are bulkheads there. Some of them are bulkhead skylights, but directly behind them are shafts, right? Full shafts. But interestingly enough, there are no open half shafts on each end of the building, which I would have expected, but they just didn't build them that way that day, Oh, so here's the other thing.
They might have known that was the end of the block. There wasn't going to be another building there.
That's possible.
Because all the other ones, the buildings are connected, but you got 7th Street and 8th Street, so there won't be another building there. So they didn't. There was no need for a shaft.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you look at that building top left corner and you look at where the shaft is there, look to the right of that building. You could see it's like a half shaft there. Right? You see what I'm talking about? That's a half shaft there. So seeing that would tell me I have another half shaft on the other side. But again, you can see it from the alpha side. But if it was, the Charlie side that I saw that, I would expect a shaft in between those buildings in the back. This is just all size up. This is stuff you can look at before you go to the roof. This right here, you can bring up on your phone as an incident commander and say, hey, look what you got up here. Right? And then the last thing, we have formats for everything in North Hudson, and this is our roof report format. And that's Richie Barreras right there, Captain Ricky Barreras. Great captain, taught me how to drive stick. Unfortunately, you talked about falling into a shaft. He fell into a shaft. They had a low window. It was heavy smoke, and he tripped over a footstool, went right into the shaft, landed on his head about 15 feet down. Had to leave the job, but chin strap was in place when he went through the window. Helmet cracked in half when he hit the ground. He would have been killed otherwise. So, wear your gear, but, be careful, because sometimes these shaft windows, these older buildings, they're low. They're maybe a foot off the ground. It's not what we normally see. But this is our report, sort of. This is what I want to hear from them, right? And if you look down at the 4th and the 5th bullet, You see right there, I want to know about heavy roof objects, and I want to know locations of shafts and firewalls. Again, the other things they're going to be given a report on the roof. Generally, he'll walk the perimeter, and then he'll tell me what he's got. We have an inverted roof. I mean, that's another thing we could talk about another day. We could talk about inverted roofs. We could talk about cornices, all these other things that are up on roofs that get guys hurt. But it's important up on the roof to make reports so that we can see what you see as well. But again, as an incident commander down at the street, don't give me, well, we don't have the computers, we don't have this. You know what? You got a phone. Bring up Google Maps, type in the address, and that's what you're going to see. So that's what I got, Duff. Hopefully, if you got attached buildings, chances are you got shafts. You got to take a look. Go to the highest building in your jurisdiction, or go Google Maps and take a look at what you got. Look from the roof and say, "Hey, look at that shaft. Look at the solar panels on this roof. Look at that big HVAC unit on there." Right? Much better to see it before you go on that roof than be surprised by it once you're on that roof.
Awesome demonstration, Chief. So we've discovered some new capabilities for doing this discussion, and I think you're going to see more of them in the future. It worked out really well for us. Thank you very much, Chief. You put that together in 5 minutes before we started tonight.
I did. I just
had to figure out how to upload it
program.
and get it going. So it worked
Well,
really,
I'm glad
really
we
well.
were able to do it.
Yeah,
I'm glad we were able to do it. I think it's important.
Yeah, over the next month, I'm going to figure out how you can use a pointer on the screen.
Oh.
Hopefully we can do that.
Yeah,
make it a little easier. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. We've had a rash of these incidents lately. And please remember Firefighter Garcia. Say a prayer for friends and family. It's devastating to everybody involved. And, none of us ever want to have one of these, but some of the things Chief Avillo spoke about tonight, some of the pictures he showed tonight might prevent something like this happening to you. And to
the brothers in New York and Chicago who fell into the shafts this past week and a half, we wish you a speedy recovery.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. This concludes another episode of Fireground Strategies and other stuff from the street with fire engineering. And we hope to see you next month. And thank you for joining us. Wealth information tonight, Chief. Happy Thanksgiving to you. And hopefully I'll see you on the island this week.
Yes. You can give me your line.
Yeah, you got it. Stay safe, buddy. And everybody else, please stay safe. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
And if you're working Thanksgiving, I hope you have a quiet one. You get to enjoy a meal at the firehouse. Thank you for joining us again. We'll see you next month.
Buy American.
There you go. Well, I was going to leave that this month because we kind of overwhelmed. But like I always say, if you can buy American, please do. We're keeping Americans working, and if they're working, they're paying taxes, which helps pay our salaries, or at least if you're a volunteer service, it helps buy your equipment. Again, stay safe. Love you all. Stay safe.
Thank you, brother. Love you.
Bye-bye.
For all your medication and narcotic tracking needs, check out the LogRX app, created by career fire and EMS professionals. That's LogRX.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Flex 7 from TenCate Protective Fabrics. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology. Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatefabrics.com/Flex7.
In the world of firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. That's why for over 2 decades, first responders nationwide have trusted the TheFireStore as their go-to source for essential equipment, apparel, and accessories. Visit TheFireStore.com online